So the natural antidote to cardiovascular disease, neurological disease, cancer risk, bone loss, all the things that my doctor was telling me, you're going to want estrogen, replacement therapy for this. What's the antidote? It's regular, moderate exercise. Okay. But it's as simple as that. It's true. But it has to be refined at every age and for every person. Okay. So for most people, 20 to 30 minutes most days of the week, the CDC, American Heart Association, right? They're all saying 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of intense work per week. And I would say in perimenopause, to post-menopause, right? We're looking at the moderate, I think. We want to be really careful with our joints and our tissues um, with that intense exercise. Okay, so maybe the kappa people who tend to have the sturdier frames and less prone to injury, they can do maybe some of the intense stuff for 75 minutes a week. And it can be a combination of intense and moderate, but I'd say err on the moderate side. And for most people, this is walking. This is just a brisk walk, right? 20 or 30 minutes most days of the week. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's free, it's accessible, and 2 days of resistance training. Okay, 2 days of using your body weight or resistance bands or dumbbells or machines like a reformer. Using your own body weight would be like calisthenics. Or even mat Pilates, yoga, right? So they both count. Using your body weight and gravity counts as resistance training. And a recent study even shows that climbing 5 flights of stairs a day, this is 50 steps, reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease by 20%. Holy cow. So 5 flights of stairs, 20%. So it doesn't take much, people. It doesn't take much. You don't have to get into competitive exercise or train for a marathon or even a 10K, a 5K. You don't even have to run to see the benefits here. And know that bone tissue, excuse me, can be formed at every age. So bone tissue can be formed at every age. However, it's important to know that your bone density peaks around 20. And this is as high as your bone density is ever going to get. Okay, so think about what you were doing when you were 20. Okay, we had a lot more sex hormones than we do now, but that's your peak. Okay, so if you were doing some resistance training at that age, that's good. If you weren't, that's okay. You naturally just had more bone density, but that's about as high as you're ever gonna be able to get. Okay, at any age after that. Um, And also, flexible tissues equals flexible arteries and lower blood pressure, greater cardiovascular health. So stretch, don't get stiff. Yoga is such an amazing way to do this because you're building strength, resiliency, incorporating breath, calming down the nervous system, reducing stress, building sex hormones and decreasing stress hormones, and you're building flexibility. Okay, so make sure you are not tight, get supple, and your arteries will too. Also, weaker bones won't break if you don't fall. So work on your balance. Balance is so important. Okay, really, really important. So 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise. So walk 20 to 30 minutes a day. Get 2 days in of resistance training. Take a yoga class or get a gym membership. I'd say hire a personal trainer to have them show you some things so you don't hurt yourself. If you're not familiar with weight training, that's important. Alignment is really important. Um, Stretch after your workouts or incorporate yoga and work on balance. Work on balance. Just do your bicep curl standing on one leg. Seriously, that helps you work on balance. But yoga is a great place to start because we're also working on balance in yoga. Yoga kind of checks off all the boxes. And then we want to look at our intensity levels, right? So Ayurveda asks Vata and Pitta to keep a lower intensity level. Vata, because they get injured very easily and they love to go really fast, and we want to bring them into balance. Okay. And Vata can get depleted very easily. And Pitta, because they love to go really intense and push themselves hard and they just don't need to. Okay. Kappa, we want them to push themselves. Okay. And they're going to be the ones who do want to push themselves. Once they get going, though, they can probably go for a really long time and it will feel good for them. Um, so, how do you know what your intensity level is? You want it nasal breathing, y'all. Nasal breathing. If you cannot breathe through your nose, your intensity level is too high. Now, if you're having problems like deviated septum, that sort of thing, some blockages, um, working on nasal breathing and being really diligent and patient with it can open your channels up again. I've seen it happen, especially with alternate nostril breathing. People have opened up I've had somebody with a completely closed septum, or closed nostril on one side because of a deviated septum, and they were able to open it back up again with practice over time with alternate nostril breathing. It's really powerful. And so if you can incorporate breathing through the nose most of the time or eventually all of the time in your workouts, this will tell you you are sustaining an intensity level that is building your cardiovascular system, burning fat, and really benefiting your nervous system. Okay, you're not going into an overtaxed nervous system response by and to overtaxing your adrenal glands and causing your system to pump out more cortisol instead of the opposite, right? We want exercise to reduce our stress levels, not increase it. So if you can breathe through your nose, you're doing great. If you're not, slow down until you can again. Breath by James Nestor. Amazing book. I highly recommend it to everybody. It tells us why nasal breathing is so important. It's just a fascinating read. And then also Dr. John Douillard, another Ayurvedic practitioner and MD. He wrote Body, Mind, and Sport. Dr. Douillard's website and business and brand is called lifespa.com. He has products and articles and podcasts. It's an amazing Ayurvedic resource. And this is the book he wrote and their studies that he talks about with nasal breathing. So he's a great resource there too. Ayurveda says work up a little sweat, right? Unless you're really dry or vata, and then cool it down. So pitta people, that 20 minutes is probably all you're going to need. Okay. Get your sweat going and then bring it back down. And kapha, you're going to need more time to do this. Vata in the middle, because vata tends to not sweat as much. So we want to be careful that vata is not spending too much time trying to get sweaty because they tend to be dry. They're not going to sweat as much. If they just have this slightest bit of glisten, okay, they're done. Pitta, they're not going to take very long. And again, kapha is going to take the longest to get up to that sweaty mark, but then they're really going to start pouring because they've got more moisture in their bodies. So great options for any age: weightlifting, yoga, walking. Add a weighted vest to your walking or to your hike. That is using body weight and gravity to build bone tissue, specifically in your hips and your legs. And like lower spine area, sacral area, add a weighted vest and you'll add more weight to work against gravity. Really helpful. Pilates, of course, using our own body weight, and we get really flexible, really mobile. We improve our relationship with the ground, really great for falling, preventing falls, being able to get up and down off the ground. I think we get afraid of falling as we age, and that tends to increase our risk of falling. They've shown because people start to change how they walk. So get comfortable with being on the ground and rolling around on the ground. Yoga and Pilates are great for that. Calisthenics, so just squats, lunges, push-ups, planks, in all varieties. Calisthenics are great. You don't need any equipment. You can do it anywhere. I would, if you're not familiar with these moves, enlist the help of a personal trainer or somebody who is really familiar with alignment and form with these moves so that you don't hurt yourself. Swimming, great for pitta, for cooling down pitta. Biking, no impact, right? We want to balance our exercise with the sedentary or active qualities of your life. So you can get a little more vigorous if you sit all day. Okay. You can be a little more restorative and yin-like if you're rushing around all day or if you're intense all day, right? Pitta is getting their heart rate up over everything. So we really want them to cool down and reduce their inflammation. Vata is probably running around all day. Let's have them balance it out with some slow flow, right? Let's have them make their movement slower, but still intense, right? And we're still getting a workout. We're still getting our heart rate up. but we're balancing out the fast frenetic pace with something that's smoother. And I love this quote. It's not a quote, I guess it's just a concept. In the Vedic tradition, in the Vedic body of knowledge is the knowledge, the giant body of knowledge from India, from which Ayurveda and yoga come. And in the Vedic tradition, it's recommended that people spend the first third of their lives practicing physical yoga, right? Asana. The second third of their lives practicing pranayama, breath work, and that helps us process emotion. And the last third of our lives practicing meditation, being, the stillness. And so all of those practices move energy, and each one takes into account the available ojas or resiliency at that stage of life. So I just think that's really an interesting way of looking at things. And I just a personal story, I have been able to, at a very pitta time in my life when I just started, my progesterone dropped, my around 35, and my blood pressure went up significantly. And it was a pretty stressful time. I was achieving a lot and really business focused and pretty stressed out. And I actually was able to lower my blood pressure as a pitta person, as an intense, competitive, workaholic person. I wouldn't call myself that much. I wouldn't identify with that as much anymore. But at that time, I was. And I actually reduced my physical exercise. I took a break and I rested. And I just focused on breath work, on my pranayama, and I lowered my blood pressure back to normal. No problem. So for pitta people, y'all, do less, and it has a huge effect. So breast health, I want to talk about that here. Um, these are things that, so breast health, bone health, heart health, these are things that doctors say, this is why we need hormone replacement therapy. And I'm here to say, you can do other things if you so choose. And here they are. So it's interesting to consider that genetics account for only about 10 to 15% of breast cancer cases. Interesting, right? So this isn't like what we're inheriting or the DNA we are passing down. This isn't the largest culprit or behind most breast cancer. Okay, so if you have an inherited risk for breast cancer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get breast cancer. But I'd say over 99%, I think, of diseases are genetic diseases or non-determinate. So just because you have a gene for something doesn't mean it's going to turn on. The food you eat, the emotions you have, that's becoming a really big factor in determining whether or not the gene for certain cancers and diseases turn on. Is actually our thoughts and our emotions and what we're feeling. It's not just about our food. But epigenetics, the study of epigenetics and how genes are turned on and off, is starting to show that actually our mind is a very big player here. So just throwing that out there. Environment. Is environment to play? I think it could be. We have these estrogen-like pollutants that could be contributing to breast cancer rates, especially in developed countries like ours, like in the US. Estrogen-like pollutants account for 50% of all breast cancer cases. So half, that's huge. These estrogen-like pollutants enhance the production of that bad estrogen. Remember I mentioned in our and the part of the talk on how we produce estrogen and what kind of estrogen we produce. Like Western medicine hasn't really been able to explain why we produce good over bad or bad over good estrogen. Ayurveda would say it's based on our digestive system and the efficiency of our metabolism, and what practices and lifestyle approaches we're bringing in are really our stress levels. So these particular pollutants increase the production of bad estrogen, and they damage our DNA. They bind to estrogen receptors in our breast tissue. They relay signals that lead to abnormal cell growth, or they support the generation of new blood vessels that feed the tumors of those abnormal cells. A study showed that DDE, which is a byproduct of DDT, I think DDT is it's an herbicide, right? So, no, maybe it's a pesticide. At any rate, it's a pollutant, it's toxic, and the byproduct of it was found in unusual amounts in the breast tissue of women with breast cancer. So, environmental pollutants could be a really big factor in breast cancer rates. So, what do we do with that? Okay, well, we eat only organic or as much organic as possible so that we can limit our exposure to those pollutants and to those toxins that are found in soil and the animals who eat those foods. So it's important to look at the diet of the animals that you are consuming. That's why, an organic diet for a cow or a chicken is important because when those animals consume the toxins in those herbicides and pesticides on the plants and in the soil that the plants grow in, those plants form their tissues. And those tissues are very dense forms of and very dense holders, right, of those toxins. And then you consume them in abundance through the flesh of those animals. So it's like they get, almost think about tissue forming from these plants. The tissue is a very dense form of whatever the plants are carrying themselves, and then you consume it and form your tissue. So, really important to spend money on the organic form of plants and meat, or you can spend it on your healthcare later. That's what I always say. Spend it now on the food. Drink filtered water. I like zero water. It does bring your particulates down to literally zero, but you're not consuming. It's the only filter on the market that will get out all of the chlorine and the lead um, and the plastic particles. So the problem with uh, having a non-particulate water is that you tend to sort of pull minerals from your own tissues because water is supposed to have some minerals in it. But I think it's a trade-off. The zero water, I know that it doesn't have the water I'm drinking doesn't have all those chemicals in it. So that is gives me peace of mind. And you can always supplement with a mineral multi with your food. And then you can do a modified cleanse or a fast once or twice a year. A Khichdi mono diet in Ayurveda is something that I offer twice a year to my clients. If you're interested, check out my website or Prolon. This is Dr. Victor Longo's way of doing a 5-day fast mimicking diet. He is one of the preeminent and leading researchers in fasting and what it can actually do to improve our longevity and what it can do for cancer patients, what it can do to prevent cancer, what it can do for diabetes, what it can do for neurological disease like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Dr. Victor Longo, Longo, he wrote The Longevity Diet. It's a fascinating read. I highly recommend it. Fasting is something that we have done just as a species naturally because of our biorhythms and the seasons. There's not a lot to eat in the spring, and that would have been a time when we would have been fasting. A lot of cultures, a lot of religions have built in fasting into their paradigm, into their practices for good reason, because it's very, very good for us. And if you can do one or two fasts a year, and these two fasts, one in Ayurveda, which uses Khichdi, we use a mono diet to achieve a fast mimicking state in the body or ketogenic state in the body. And Dr. Longo has a company called, or he devised a company called Prolon. He doesn't get any profits from it. It's a separate entity from his research, but they make products that keep you in a fast mimicking or a ketogenic state. They're all vegetarian, no animal products at all, no soy. It's a really high quality fast. If anyone is interested in checking that out, I highly recommend it. So Prolon, I think the website is called prolonlife.com, and this will help burn fat cells, which store toxins and heavy metals, and also allows the body to naturally kill cancer cells. It also helps produce human growth hormone, which keeps our telomeres, the ends of our genes, longer, and that sustains our lives longer with more quality of life. So fasting, very powerful and something you can do to help reduce your risk of breast cancer and all types of cancer. Dietary changes could prevent 30 to 40% of breast cancer cases annually. And so one of the big factors in diet is just getting trans fats out of your diet. Trans fats are coming from partially hydrogenated oils. Um, they're in processed foods, so like margarine, which it's not a very popular food source anymore, but it's still out there in the form of hydrogenated oils in our processed foods, like snack cakes, baked goods, fried food, fast food. It's in things to keep them shelf stable longer. So we want to avoid all of those things, right? So avoid trans fat. Look for partially hydrogenated anything, and if you see it, run. Um, Women with the highest levels of trans fat in their blood had twice the risk of breast cancer versus women with the lowest levels. So it's definitely something that could um, increase your chances of developing cancer, and also heart disease. And so, what do you do? Okay, we look at the considerations for environmental toxins. We try to eat mostly organic or all organic if we can. And then we get more fruits, more vegetables, more fiber from whole grains, more cruciferous vegetables, and healthy soy. So organic soybeans or edamame, organic tofu, organic soy milk, organic tempeh, organic tamari sauce, which is non-gluten or gluten-free soy sauce, or Bragg's liquid aminos, if you're familiar with that. It's non-GMO soy that doesn't have gluten in it. Soy sauce typically has gluten in it. In case you didn't know that. So if you're trying to avoid gluten, you want to go with the soy sauce that doesn't have it, and that's Tamari or Bragg's liquid aminos. So all of these things help decrease our chances of all cancers, but the fiber, especially, and the cruciferous vegetables help us process excess estrogen, good or bad estrogen. So bringing in broccoli and cauliflower, asparagus, kale, Brussels sprouts, chard, all of these things that are in the cruciferous vegetable family are bitter greens, really helps the liver process excess estrogen and can help with menopause symptoms, and also really healthy and organic soy, non-G. So if it's organic, it's non-GMO. If it's non-GMO, it's not necessarily organic. So if you're eating organic soy, it's also non-genetically modified. So go with organic. Organic's always the safest, but often the more expensive bet, I know, but spend the money now on your health instead of your healthcare later. And countries that have the highest consumptions of healthy and high quality soy have the lowest incidences of breast cancer and cancer in general. Alcohol, so 1 to 2 drinks per day raises our risk of developing hormone sensitive tumors, which is the most common type of breast cancer. It's 70% of all cases of breast cancer, by 32%. That's pretty high. 1 drink a day increases our risk of breast cancer by 10%. And so then we get it's almost a 10% increase with every extra drink we consume. And the liver is the organ that has to process and flush all this extra estrogen. So if it's impaired by alcohol, estrogen remains in the system, causing potential harm. And that's sort of why they think that there's that strong connection between alcohol and breast cancer. So don't start drinking if you already don't. That's good. And if you do drink, really, and you have a high risk of breast cancer, and maybe you're not doing any of these other things, but this is something you want to work on, then really limit your consumption, right? 1 drink a day, and that's 5 ounces of wine, 1.5 ounces of hard liquor, or 12 ounces of beer. So start to look at alcohol consumption. It really it affects our brain, it affects our adrenal glands, it affects our stress hormones, and it affects how we react to stress as well. And radiation via mammograms is something to consider. Mammogram screening really prevents one breast cancer death out of every 17,000 women per year over age 50 who receive a mammogram. And that's one out of every 25,000 deaths per year for women in their 40s, even lower percentage of death prevention. So mammograms aren't doing a lot. Um, and the advice keeps changing around them because of their quote negative effects, right? We have all these false alarms that include an unnecessary biopsy, the damage to the breast tissue, increased stress around it. Do I have cancer? Do I not have cancer? Um, and I've talked to women who are in this boat because they have a high risk of cancer. Their mother had cancer, their sisters have had breast cancer. They've undergone, mammograms more than once a year on a regular basis and have had multiple biopsies with um, no actual cancer diagnosis or any worries. But all of the worry and the trauma to the breast tissue is it's pretty detrimental, they say. And I believe that. So, what do we do? I'm not telling anyone not to get mammograms. But I do think talking about the frequency of mammograms or alternatives to them, like ultrasound, which I know insurance will only pay for if you've had a mammogram and you have dense breast tissue, or thermal imaging, which is not the gold standard in Western medicine, but does show more heat, which is in the tissue, which is an indication that there is cancer there, abnormal tissue there, and they're non-invasive. They don't involve radiation. My take on this is that, if you have a lower risk of breast cancer and you're doing an exam every single day through your Abhyanga practice, and you're massaging the lymph tissue and you're really getting in there and getting familiar with your breast tissue. You are moving the lymph around and giving the tissue a really thorough massage, clearing stagnation. I do that every single day. And I am 44. I have not had a mammogram yet. They keep moving the age around, 45, or is it 40? Um, so I haven't had a mammogram yet. I haven't felt called to do that or irradiate my breast tissue unnecessarily. I don't have a family history of it. That's just my personal where I am right now with mammogram. I have a lot of colleagues and friends who are in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s who have never had mammograms. They go this route instead. They're very, very, vigilant and take a lot of care around their breast tissue and look for, signs and practice Ayurveda and do all these other things. So again, I'm not telling anyone not to get a mammogram. I'm just saying that there are other ways to approach this if you feel like radiating your breast is something that you don't want to do or that feels unnecessary. Um, Also, the lungs in Ayurveda are very much related to breast tissue. So, getting in your alternate nostril breathing every day will help clear stagnation in that area, and help to massage and clear that tissue. I know a lot of women who have experienced breast cancer after a period of very, very intense grief. And interestingly enough, the first thing their doctors do is take them off their hormone replacement therapy. So I feel like, if it's so safe, why is that the first thing we're doing for women when they have breast cancer? Things to think about. Um, and then experiencing our grief and our emotions fully, right? So journaling, getting therapy, finding community and talking about what you're going through, exercising to arrest the stress cycle, moderate, right? Getting more hugs to increase those feel good hormones that counterbalance the stress hormones. So all of these things can support breast health, without having to, replace hormones, bring in extra hormones, if that is what you're choosing to do. There are ways to support yourself without that. Breast cancer patients who were able to increase their social support during their cancer journeys reduce their risk of dying by 70%. So imagine what that can do when we're well, right? if it can keep 70% of women's dying risk, death risk down, or decrease their risk by 70%, then what can it do for us when we're well? I think so much. Cancer patients' blood, brain, and saliva tests show that receiving social support leads to significant increases in healing hormones. So we're getting community and social support. We get more dopamine, we get more oxytocin, we get more serotonin, we get more endorphins. That in turn boosts our immune system, and that naturally kills cancer cells. We are equipped to heal ourselves if we give ourselves the opportunity. We have the potential. Everybody does. Meditation gives us higher levels of melatonin, helps us sleep better, gives us a boosted immune system. And cancer patients typically have dangerously low levels of melatonin. So again, another reason to bring in meditation and spiritual practices and get more sleep, work on that pillar, that second pillar of health, sleep. Meditation gives us more virus antibodies. So many cancers have been linked to viruses, like HPV for one. More telomerase, and that's our anti-aging enzyme, right? It keeps our telomeres, this little ends of our genes long that determines our lifespan. And meditation and spiritual practices can change our gene expression, right? So our thoughts, our emotions, they can effectively turn off cancer genes. It's amazing what they are learning right now about the emotional system and our genes and how they express themselves. So for bone health, again, I mentioned we build our highest level of bone density around age 25, like 20 to 25. And then around 35, we start to lose about 0.5% of our bone mass until menopause. So that could be 15 years for some women if you're, hitting menopause around 50 or to 55. So that could be about 7.5%, 8% of your bone mass will go down between ages 35 and 45, or 40, ages 35 and 50 if you're hitting menopause at 50. And then the first 5 years of menopause, you're going to lose 1 to 2% of bone mass per year. So it's going to double or triple or quadruple as far as loss, but just for 5 years. And then after that, you're going to slow down to about 1% per year through your 60s. After 70, your bone loss slows down again to 0.5% per year. So it starts decreasing, it speeds up for 5 years, it decreases for another about 10, and then it goes back down to just 0.5 again. So what I'm trying to say here is not to scare everybody, but you're losing bone mass is normal, but you can build bone with resistance exercise at every age. People in their 90s can build bone tissue. So your bone density is never going to be higher than your peak around 25. So if you're a Vata person, you have naturally thinner bones. So I always tell people, don't let the osteopenia, which is like the pre-osteoporosis diagnosis, the osteopenia, that term or that diagnosis, disturb you. Start incorporating resistance work into your routine. Continue to monitor yourself. You just don't want it to worsen. And who's to say that you haven't been osteopenic most of your life if you've been a Vata person, right? The insurance doesn't even cover bone density, DEXA scans, bone density tests until you're like 65. And at that point, I mean, you've been losing 0.5 to 2% of your bone mass every year, right? And so, of course, you're going to be osteopenic, or so many women are going to have osteopenia in their 60s. But if we start doing resistance training regularly and keep doing it, this is not going to be a problem, right? So start now. Start now. Twice a week, right? Get to the gym, get to a Pilates class, get to a yoga class, and do it every week. Do it every week. Put a weighted vest on when you walk, okay? So if you never did resistance training in your 20s and you've always had thinner bones, you probably have lower bone density than the people who are maybe doing more resistance work, or just who had naturally thicker bones in their 20s. It's going to be the same story in your 60s as well. So osteopenia is something that the drug companies came up with so that they could prescribe, Boniva and those bone growth drugs to women. So don't be worried too much about osteopenia. who's to say you haven't had really thin bones your whole life? This might not be anything new, but it's a really good reason to go ahead and start doing your resistance training if you haven't done that already. In fact, one thing my doctor encouraged me to do, like, go ahead and get a bone density test now in your 40s and see where you are. Get a baseline. It's only about $150 out of pocket. And so if you can spare that, I think it's a test worth having. You do want to consider that I think there are some issues with like reliability. You want to use the same DEXA scan machine. So if you can, stick with the same provider, the same lab or testing facility to do your DEXA scan later as well. Something to consider around bone density drugs, they actually produce like the wrong kind of bone tissue. They produce weaker trabecular or bone tissue. So they can actually increase your risk of fracture if you take them too long. So be careful with the bone density increasing drugs. I would say if you can, go with your resistance training, retest, and see if you can either stabilize or reverse your bone loss. Okay, so we talked about this, what to do, resistance training twice a week, weighted vest when you're walking, eat more greens. These are the minerals you need to actually build bone. So if you're a vegetarian and you're over 65, it's probably time to bring in some poultry and fish. Got to bring a little meat back into your diet. Even the proponents like Dr. Longo, who I mentioned earlier, of a plant-based diet throughout life to reduce all forms of disease and cancer. Um, they're even saying, okay, after 65, we need to bring back in a little bit of meat. Okay, a couple times a week, some poultry, some fish. Vata time of life. Um, for Vata people, for Vata time of life, Ayurveda says meat can be medicine and can help when there is depletion of the tissues, including bone tissue. We allow the animal to take in all of those minerals for us, digest them, and then we're able to assimilate them through their flesh. And so it's a more bioavailable way to get those minerals in to build bones. And it's not something you have to do all the time or regularly, but it needs to happen a little more after 65, especially if you're experiencing some lower bone density and depletion of the tissue. We want to make sure you're really working hard on your digestion. So eliminate those distractions, chew really well, give yourself time to digest. Add all those spices into your food so you're breaking down and assimilating the nutrients and forming healthy tissue. Reduce your stress. Here it is again, cortisol. It breaks down all of your tissues, including bones. So work on stress and you will have higher bone density throughout your life. Get 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. Your resistance training is just throw it out the window, because if you don't repair the tissue the muscle and bone tissue that you break, that you burn up during those workouts, or that you technically damage during your resistance training workouts, and you don't sleep after that, it's not going to get repaired. Okay, so sleep is when we were repairing all the tissue that we damage and then build back stronger during resistance training. So you've got to sleep if you're doing resistance training. Okay. So that second pillar of life coming back in. If you supplement with calcium, be sure you include D3, K2, and magnesium. Calcium alone could be absorbed improperly and calcify our arteries, increasing our risk of cardiovascular disease. So make sure you're including the other things that help you absorb the calcium and the other things that build bone. D3, K2, magnesium. Okay. That will help you absorb the calcium, assimilate it, and keep things from going to the wrong place and just hanging out in circulation and calcifying elsewhere. So, heart health. This is our final topic, you guys, third and final topic around menopause and like considerations for these specific tissues that that estrogen and progesterone replacement either treat or increase risk of. So, heart health. Women present really differently than men when having a cardiac event, and they tend to wait to go to the ER when they have these symptoms. And some of them are unexplained or debilitating fatigue that doesn't go away with sleep, difficulty sleeping, shortness of breath, indigestion, nausea, and tightness and pain in the back, arms, jaw, or neck. And this can often be felt in the the lower part of the torso or lower in the torso, then men experience it. Okay. So if you're having these recurring symptoms, it can hurt to get things checked out. Okay. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. Trust your instinct. Remember, one of the things that lowers our ojas and our resiliency is just ignoring ourselves. So, as women, we have, I believe, greater intuition and insight into our bodies. Pay attention to that. Don't ignore it. So, what do we do for heart health? Well, it's everything we've already talked about to balance our hormones, our bones, and our breast tissue. Exercise, stress reduction, reduce your alcohol intake, experience your emotions fully, build community. And specifically for heart health, we want to also reduce inflammatory emotions. So our intensity, those pitta emotions, anger, judgment, criticism, resentment. Ayurveda says one of the causes of heart disease on a psychospiritual level is holding anger and resentment in our hearts. It kind of burns us up and erodes and chips away at our resiliency. So practice forgiveness. It's the greatest gift you can give yourself. Greatest gift you can give yourself. Practice forgiveness. Um, Try to find ways to play and have fun and lighten up, right? Bring in more play, more creativity to balance out the work and the intensity and the drive and the competitiveness, if those are things that you have. Reduce inflammation in general. We want to bring in more omega 3s than omega 6s. So, more fish oil, olive oil, which isn't omega-3, but it's monounsaturated fat that has been shown to increase our good cholesterol and decrease our bad cholesterol. And then ghee, really great nerve tissue building and digestive system repairing oil. And then fruits, vegetables, grains, right? So all these things help reduce inflammation and bring in healthy tissue. And then the trans fat, we already talked about that around breast health. So the partially hydrogenated anything, and fried food, processed food, we want to limit those. Those have a lot of those omega 6s as well. Okay. That cause inflammation, omega 3 reduces inflammation. So fish oil, walnuts, so plant sources of omega 3, walnuts, flaxseed, hemp seed. I think chia seed as well has omega 3s. And these plant sources of omega 3s have basically like a precursor to, they have DHA, and you use that to produce EPA, which is what's in fish oil, right? So it's like the fish have already done sort of like the cows and the chickens, eating the grains, eating the things that produce tissue in them, and then we eat their tissue and assimilate that. So they've kind of done the digestion for us. Fish oil, the same thing. The fish have taken in the algae and the plankton and all the things that have the omega 3s in the sea, and have digested them. And then we're taking the oil from the fish and consuming it. And so it's one less step that we have to undergo to take in the omega 3s or the EPA. And with plant sources like walnuts, flaxseed, etc., our body has to convert it. So we have to use our digestive system to convert it. So if you are only getting a lot of these nutrients from plant sources, that's great. Just make sure your digestion is really strong. If you're having gas, if you're having bloating, if you're having constipation or diarrhea, you're not digesting and assimilating these foods well. Okay, so you want to work on your digestion and possibly consider incorporating some animal sources of these foods or these nutrients. Some of the herbs that help support us in menopause, I just wanted to share these with you. We typically don't just put one herb in a formula. We will sort of combine a lot of these. And so you can even look on the market at banyanbotanicals.com, at lifespa.com, and see if there are formulas for menopause or for hormonal balance that contain some of these herbs. Most likely you will find them, and you can try those out and see. If you're working with an Ayurvedic practitioner like me, we will put together a formula for you that might contain some of these based on remember what your symptoms are and what the qualities of your symptoms are, because all of these herbs have different qualities. A digestive herb that's great for most people is fennel. And so fennel seeds, like fennel powder, fennel seeds that have been ground up, or chewing fennel seeds after a meal, or fennel tea, or fennel bulb, the actual plant. This can help reduce hot flashes, help with painful and dry periods, and also help reduce gas in general. Ashwagandha, you've probably heard of. This is a great one. It decreases cortisol production. Great one. So it helps decrease cortisol production, and then you can use your progesterone to produce estrogen, or just use your progesterone to help balance excess estrogen if you have too much. This aids in balancing, therefore, all of the hormones. It helps build healthy muscle and bone tissue and all of your tissues. It builds ojas. So ashwagandha is a really great one if you're having depletion, if you're really stressed out, if you're suffering from anxiety and depression. If you're having a lot of hormonal imbalance, you can try ashwagandha. Shatavari can help reduce hot flashes. It is an estrogen precursor. It provides building blocks of estrogen. So it really helps with hydration and dryness. It helps build ojas. This one's not one you want to use if you have a lot of breast tenderness or bloating, because it helps produce estrogen. And those are usually signs of too much estrogen. Okay. So it's important when you're working, even with herbs, which are the building blocks of and help balance hormones without bringing in actual hormones. It is important to work with a practitioner. Just consult an herbalist if you can, before you decide to bring some of these in. Vidari Khanda can help balance sex hormones. It also helps strengthen the urinary and vaginal tissues. So great for incontinence if that is coming in for you at this time of life. I usually combine it with Gokshura, which is another good herb for the urinary tract, marshmallow, which helps build the microbiome and hydrate tissues, and cinnamon, which can also help with the pelvic floor and the urinary tract. So Vidari Khanda is really helpful in just strengthening the pelvic floor and helps build ojas as well. Shilajit is interesting. It's a mineral pitch from the Himalayas. It's, these ancient tropical forests were just basically smushed in between continents, and the Himalayas rose. And every summer, I guess the primordial ooze from these forests seeps out of the rock. And so this mineral pitch is collected and dried, and it helps build healthy bones and tissues in conjunction with your regular exercise. It helps build ojas. It also helps, it's good for men. It helps increase naturally your testosterone levels in a healthy way that doesn't harm the prostate. And then Arjuna helps reduce our blood pressure, rejuvenates our hearts if you're having heart palpitations and the things that come along with anxiety or panic attacks, tachycardia. Arjuna can be really helpful here. Brahmi, Gotukola. These help reduce plaque and build up in the blood vessels and help kind of cool the mind and enhance our cognitive function. Also builds ojas. Guduchi is really nice for liver function, so it can help you metabolize excess hormones, also helps reduce stress and build ojas. And then turmeric, we all know turmeric, it improves your liver function. So again, it can help you to process excess estrogen. It can reduce inflammation. It starves tumors and keeps them from producing their own blood supplies, their own blood vessels. So it's anti-cancer, anti-tumor, anti-inflammatory. Turmeric's amazing. Put it in your food, cook with it. You don't necessarily have to take it in a capsule form. Turmeric is most bioavailable when you add a little bit of black pepper. So you want your body to absorb it, add a little black pepper. And that's all, folks. That was so much. Thank you for sticking around. If you are here, you have listened to the whole talk, all of these talks that I ended up having to break down. I thought this was going to be an hour. Haha, that's hilarious. But we covered so much. I am so appreciative of you for being here with me. I can't express my gratitude enough. If you need to get in touch with me, if you want any of those handouts or materials I was talking about, please just shoot me an email. Meghan@meghanhays.com. You can check out my website, meghanhays.com, for all the services I offer, some of those cleanses I was talking about, community support, consultations, herbal support. Please Hit me up with questions. Let me know what's on your mind. I know I brought up possibly some controversial things here, and I just want to reiterate that Ayurveda is not about putting out there what's right for everyone. It's about finding what's right for you. And so I would never condemn anyone's decision on how they take care of themselves. You, and you know you best. And Ayurveda is a system of medicine that helps us find out who we are, find out what we need, and feel our best, live our longest, and really increase the quality of that long life. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was informative. Please reach out to me if you need to. And I hope to hear from you and see you soon. Thanks again, everyone.